I always thought I came from a respectable family. Not just respectable, exceptional. The Whitmores had been lawyers for 4 generations. My father, Jonathan Whitmore, was one of Boston's most feared legal minds. My mother, Vivian, was quieter, but no less sharp. I followed in their footsteps. Harvard Law, top of my class, partner at 34. I thought I was their legacy. I lived for that legacy. The name, the reputation, the weight of 4 generations of legal excellence resting on my shoulders. Maybe I cared too much about it. Maybe I let it define me. But it was all I knew, until the day I discovered my mother had transferred every family asset to someone I had never heard of. A name that didn't exist in our family tree. Elena White. I was furious, not just angry, devastated. This wasn't about money. This was about betrayal, about trust, about everything I thought I knew about my family. I confronted her, of course, demanded answers, but she said nothing. Just sipped her tea like my world wasn't crumbling. So I did what any lawyer would do. I sued her. Yes, I took my own mother to court. I wasn't being vindictive. My father's will was clear. I was his sole heir. There was no clause about mysterious beneficiaries. I had every legal right to stop the transfer, or so I believed. The courthouse felt different that day. Cold, unfamiliar. Even though I'd won dozens of cases in that same building, my mother didn't hire a lawyer. She represented herself. She sat across from me in her pearl earrings and ivory shawl. Looking more like a retired librarian than a legal opponent, I had 3 attorneys with me. A table full of documents. Evidence of my inheritance rights. I thought this would be simple. Then my mother stood up. "Your Honor," she said, "before we proceed, I have evidence that changes everything." She walked to the bailiff, handed him 3 items. A sealed envelope, a cassette tape, a legal document. "I'd like to enter these into evidence," she said. My attorney objected. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We haven't seen these documents. Neither has my daughter," my mother said, looking directly at me. Until now, the judge reviewed the items. His expression changed. "I'll allow it," he said. My mother returned to her table. Her hands were steady. Mine were shaking. "The first piece of evidence," she said, "is a birth certificate." The bailiff handed it to me. I opened it, saw my face, my birthday, but the name, Elena White. Father unknown, mother Vivian A. Whitmore. I stared at it. This had to be wrong. "Your Honor," I said, "this is clearly fabricated. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. This is—" but my voice trailed off. Something about the document looked real. Too real. "The second piece of evidence," my mother said, "is a recording from 1986. She pressed play on an old cassette player. My father's voice filled the courtroom. Younger, softer than I remembered. "If this gets complicated, Viv, just say she's ours. No one needs to know she's the child from that settlement case. The malpractice suit. Let's raise her right. She'll never need to find out." The world stopped. I knew about that case. The settlement. It was one of my father's most difficult losses early in his career. "The third piece of evidence," my mother continued, "is a trust deed. Dated 5 years before your father died. It establishes that all family assets would transfer to Elena White upon my discretion." She looked at me. Her eyes were sad now, not cold. Sad. You see, Eleanor, that settlement case involved a young mother who lost her baby due to medical malpractice. I was the defense attorney. We lost. I felt sick. The mother was devastated, alone. She couldn't afford to raise another child. So when she became pregnant again, I offered to help. My mother's voice became softer. "I adopted you quietly, off the books. Your father and I raised you as our own." The courtroom spun. "You're not Jonathan Whitmore's biological daughter," she said. But you are his daughter in every way that matters. I stared at her. This woman who had read me Supreme Court cases as bedtime stories, who had taught me to love the law. You lied to me, I whispered. I protected you, she said. From a truth that would have only brought you pain. The judge ruled against me. Of course he did. I had no legal standing, no claim to assets that were never legally mine. I walked out of that courtroom feeling hollow. Days passed. I couldn't work, couldn't think, couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. But something nagged at me, something about the name Elena White. Why that name? Why transfer everything to someone with that specific name? I hired a private investigator. Not to fight the ruling, just to understand. 2 weeks later, he called. I found Elena White, he said. Where? Vermont. She's 25, a lawyer, graduated from Yale. My heart stopped. 25. Yes. And Eleanor. There's something else. She's been working on estate law for the past 3 years, specializing in inheritance disputes. I drove to Vermont that afternoon, to a modest house with a green mailbox that said E. White. I sat in my car for an hour, trying to find the courage to knock. When I finally did, the door opened almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. And there she was. Same eyes, same jawline, 25 years old, beautiful. My daughter. Eleanor Whitmore, she said, not a question. Elena, I said. Elena White. She stepped aside. Let me in. The house was small but elegant. Law books everywhere. Diplomas on the walls. Yale Law School. Order of the Coif. A life built carefully. Thoughtfully. Without me. You know who I am, I said. I know exactly who you are, she said. I've known for 3 years. We sat across from each other. 2 lawyers, 2 strangers, 2 family members who had never met. Vivian found me, Elena said. She hired me to handle some estate work. Then she told me the truth. The truth. That I was your daughter. The one you gave up when you were 17. I felt like I was drowning. I was 17, I said. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Elena's expression didn't change. I know the story, she said. Vivian told me about the pressure, about the family reputation, about how keeping me would ruin your future. Her voice was calm, professional, like she was discussing a case. I wanted to keep you, I said. But everyone said, Did you? Elena interrupted. Really? Or did you want the life they promised you more? I stared at her. This composed young woman who looked so much like me. I was 17, I repeated. So was the girl you represented last year in the Peterson case, Elena said. The one whose parents wanted her to give up her baby. You fought for her right to keep him. You said 17 was old enough to know what she wanted. She had done her research. Of course she had. That was different. Was it? Elena asked. Or did you just have more to lose? I couldn't answer that. Elena walked to her desk, pulled out a thick folder. Do you want to know what I've been doing for 3 years? She asked. While you were living your perfect life, she opened the folder. It was full of documents, financial records, legal papers. I've been studying you, she said. Every case you've won, every client you've represented, every dollar you've made. She spread the papers on the coffee table. The Henderson case. You charged a grieving widow $300,000 to contest her husband's will. A will that was clearly valid. I remembered that case. It had been a long shot. But the widow insisted. She wanted to fight it. Did she, or did you convince her she had a chance because you needed the billable hours? Elena pulled out another document. The Morrison divorce. You represented the husband, helped him hide assets from his wife. Assets that should have gone to support their 3 children. I was representing my client's interests. Your client was a millionaire. His ex-wife was working 2 jobs to feed their kids. Elena's voice remained level, but her eyes were cold now. The Ramirez case. You helped convict an innocent man for murder. The real killer went free. My blood turned to ice. How do you know about that? I know about everything, Elena said. Every dirty trick, every ethical corner you've cut, every life you've destroyed for money. She pulled out a recording device. I especially know about this conversation from 2 years ago, after you won the Ramirez case. She pressed play. My voice filled the room. These people are so stupid. They actually believed our story. Poor little Miguel will rot in prison while the real killer walks free. But who cares, we won. We always win. I heard myself laughing on the recording. You recorded that? Your secretary did, Elena said. She was scared of you. Scared of what you might do if she ever crossed you. So she recorded everything. Elena turned off the recorder. 20 years of recordings, 20 years of evidence, 20 years of crimes. I couldn't speak. So here's what's going to happen, Elena said. Tomorrow I'm filing complaints with the Massachusetts Bar Association, the FBI, the IRS, every agency that might be interested in your creative interpretation of legal ethics. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can, Elena said. Vivian gave me access to your father's files, all of them. He kept meticulous records of every bribe, every cover-up, every illegal deal. She pulled out another box of documents. The Whitmore family built their reputation on corruption, and I'm going to tear it all down. Why, I asked, what do you want? Elena smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything. The way I did. The way my biological mother did when your father destroyed her life. I didn't know about Margaret Chen. But you knew about Miguel Ramirez. And Sarah Henderson. And Tom Morrison's children. You knew about all of them. Elena stood up, walked to the window. I grew up in foster care, she said. Do you know what that's like, being unwanted? Being passed from house to house, never having anyone who really cared about you. She turned back to me. While you were living in your mansion, going to Harvard, building your perfect career on other people's misery. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Elena said. Sorry doesn't give me back 25 years. Sorry doesn't help the people you've hurt. She walked to the door, opened it. You should leave now, she said. I stood up, walked toward the door. Elena, I said, what happens now between us? She looked at me with those cold eyes. Nothing happens between us, she said. You stopped being my mother the day you signed those papers. And after tomorrow, you'll stop being a lawyer too. Will I see you again? Elena considered this. Maybe, she said. At your disbarment hearing, I'll be there to testify. I walked to my car, got in, sat there for a moment. Then I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw Elena standing in her doorway, watching me leave. The last time I would ever see my daughter. 3 months later, I was disbarred. The FBI investigation destroyed what was left of my reputation. The media coverage was relentless. Whitmore dynasty crumbles in corruption scandal. Elite lawyers' decades of crime exposed. From Harvard to homeless, the fall of Eleanor Whitmore. I lost my house first. The beautiful Victorian mansion where I'd grown up. Where I'd dreamed of raising my own family someday. The bank foreclosed within 6 weeks. My car went next. The BMW I'd bought to celebrate making partner. Repossessed from the courthouse parking lot where I'd just been disbarred. My savings were frozen during the FBI investigation. My assets seized. My trust fund, the money I'd thought was my birthright, revealed to never have been mine at all. I moved into a studio apartment in the worst part of town. 400 square feet. Stained carpet. Broken air conditioning. The kind of place I used to drive past without seeing. Now it was home. I applied for dozens of jobs, paralegal positions, legal secretary, document review, even retail work. "We'll call you," they'd say, but they never did. My name was poison now. My face had been on every news broadcast in Boston. Finally, a small immigration law firm took pity on me. Or maybe they just needed someone desperate enough to work for minimum wage. File these. The supervising attorney would say dropping boxes of paperwork on my desk. Cases I once would have charged $50,000 to handle. Now I was making $8 an hour to organize them. The other paralegals whispered when I walked by. "That's her. The one who sued her own mother. I heard she framed an innocent man for murder. My cousin was her client. She stole everything they had. I ate lunch alone. Every day. In the parking lot behind the building. Too ashamed to sit in the break room with the people whose respect I'd never earn back. At night in my tiny apartment, I'd lie awake thinking about Miguel Ramirez. About Mrs. Henderson in her nursing home. About Tommy Morrison, who hadn't seen his father in years because of me. I'd think about Elena. About the baby I'd held for 10 minutes before signing her away. About the life I could have had if I'd been braver. If I'd chosen love over legacy. Some nights I'd drive past the old Whitmore mansion. The new owners had painted it white. Added a playground in the backyard. I could see children's toys scattered on the lawn. A real family lived there now. I'd sit in my rusted Honda, the only car I could afford, and remember being 8 years old. Playing in those same gardens, believing I was special. Believing I was destined for greatness. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my whole life fighting for inheritance, for legacy, for the right to be called a Whitmore. And now I had nothing. No name worth claiming. No reputation worth defending. No family to disappoint. I was nobody. One evening, 6 months after my disbarment, I got a phone call. "Eleanor Whitmore." "Yes. This is Dr. Sarah Kim at Massachusetts General Hospital. Your mother has been admitted. Vivian, I hadn't spoken to her since the trial. What happened?" "She had a stroke. It's serious. She's asking for you." I drove to the hospital in my broken-down Honda. Past the buildings where I used to practice law. Past the courthouse where I'd sued my own mother. Vivian looked so small in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires everywhere. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. "Eleanor," she whispered when she saw me. I sat beside her bed. This woman who had shaped my entire life. Who had taught me to value all the wrong things. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "I know. The money. Elena deserves it. But I should have told you the truth earlier. It doesn't matter now. It does matter." Vivian struggled to sit up. "You were a good daughter. I made you believe terrible things about what mattered. About who you should be." Tears ran down her cheeks. "You could have been extraordinary, Eleanor. You could have helped people. Instead, I taught you to hurt them." I held her hand. This frail, dying woman who had once seemed so powerful. "I forgive you," I said. "Can you forgive yourself?" I didn't answer, because I couldn't. Vivian died 3 days later. Elena came to the funeral. We didn't speak. She stood on the other side of the grave, watching them lower our mother into the ground, watching me mourn alone. After the service, she walked over. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, formal, distant. "Thank you. She left you something." Elena handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter and a key. "There's a storage unit," Elena said. "Downtown, Unit 247. She wanted you to have what's inside." I drove to the storage facility that afternoon. Opened Unit 247 with shaking hands. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, all labeled with dates going back 40 years. I opened the first box. It was full of photographs. Pictures of me as a baby, as a child, school reports, art projects, every achievement carefully preserved. The second box contained more photos, but these were different. Pictures of Elena as a baby, hospital bracelets, footprints, things I'd never seen. Vivian had kept them all these years, evidence of the daughter I'd given away. The third box was full of newspaper clippings about my cases, my victories, my rise to partnership, but underneath were other clippings. Articles about Miguel Ramirez's conviction, about Mrs. Henderson's bankruptcy, about families I'd destroyed. Vivian had been watching, collecting evidence of what I'd become. At the bottom of that box was a journal. Vivian's handwriting. Eleanor is becoming everything I was afraid she would become. Everything I taught her to become. I have created a monster. I must find Elena. I must make this right, before it's too late. Elena is extraordinary, kind. Everything Eleanor could have been if I hadn't poisoned her with my values. I am going to give Elena everything, not to punish Eleanor, but to save what's left of this family's soul. I closed the journal, sat in that storage unit surrounded by the debris of 3 broken lives. My mother's guilt, my daughter's anger, my own shame, all of it carefully preserved, all of it leading to this moment, when I had lost everything, when I had nothing left but the truth. I was nobody's daughter, nobody's mother, nobody's lawyer. I was just Eleanor, alone with the consequences of every choice I'd ever made. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was exactly what I deserved. Maybe I deserve it. Maybe I don't. I guess that's for other people to decide. 1 year later, Elena called me. I have news, she said. Good news. I'm pregnant. I felt my heart skip. Congratulations, I said. That's wonderful. Eleanor, she said. I was wondering, would you like to be involved as a grandmother? I started crying right there in my office. I would love that, I said. There's one condition, Elena said. Anything. Promise me you'll be honest with this child. No lies. No secrets. No matter how hard the truth is. I promise, I said. 6 months later, I held my granddaughter for the first time. Sophia Elena White. She was perfect. As I looked at her tiny face, I thought about legacy again. About what we pass down to the people we love. Not money, not names, not reputations, but truth, love. The courage to start over when we've made mistakes. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything.